come in a variety of colors, shapes, and sizes. Some of us grow in bunches. Some of us grow alone. Some of us are cupped inward. Some of us spread ourselves wide. Some of us are old and dried and tougher than we appear. Some of us are still in bud. Some of us grow close to the ground, and some of us stretch towards the sun. Some of us feel like weeds sometimes. Some of us carry seeds sometimes. Some of us are prickly sometimes. And all of us are beautiful. What a bouquet of people we are. Welcome to Flower Communion at West Hills Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I'm the Reverend Tracy Springberry. I use the pronouns she and her, and it is my great joy to serve this blossoming congregation. We also welcome you to our coffee hour. After this service, there will be a coffee hour in Zoom. The link came in your order of service, and it is a really great way to connect with this community. We do joys and sorrows, we talk about the service, and we break into small groups to check in more deeply. There's also other ways to be connected to this congregation during these virtual times, and you can read your bulletin to find out more. We're going to do the children's chalice lighting this morning. The children among you will surely know it, and some of you might as well. We've done it before. So work along with me. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. We are a church of open minds, helping hands, and loving hearts. We take care of each other, and we take care of the earth. Let us say our affirmation together. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to learn what is true. And let us open our hearts to love one another.
Shall we gather at the river where bright angel feet have trod, with its crystal tide forever flowing by the throne of God? Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. Ere we reach that shining river, ere we lay our burdens down, grace our spirits will deliver and provide a robe and crown. Oh yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. Soon we'll reach the shining river. Soon our pilgrimage will cease, and soon our happy hearts will quiver with the melody of peace. Oh yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of
Good morning, friends. Good to be together with you here today. I want to tell you a little bit about this celebration that we're having today, and that many of you were able to join us in person last Sunday called Flower Communion. And Flower Communion seems like maybe it's just something that we came up with because it's spring, almost summer, and wouldn't it be fun to celebrate the flowers and the beauty that is all around us after what seemed like a winter that would last forever, and that it would just rain every day for the rest of our lives. But Flower Communion is not new. Flower Communion is old and dates back to the 1930s, and a man named Norbert Čapek, who was a minister in what was then known as Czechoslovakia in Prague. And he saw his congregation being beaten down emotionally by the new regime of the Third Reich and the Nazis. And what Norbert wanted to do was to remind people of the beauty that was all around them. So he invited his congregation to bring flowers from their gardens, from their own individual homes, and bring that beauty into their congregation. And he said, look at each of these flowers, and then look out at this community when they were still able to gather in community. Look out at this community, see the beauty of each individual flower, and then see the beauty and notice the beauty of each individual person. And he really wanted to highlight that each person was unique and each person had their own individual gifts. During a time when people were being told that their individuality and their opinions about welcoming the stranger were wrong. Now, eventually, this story takes a pretty sad turn because he was arrested by the Nazis and sent to Dachau concentration camp. And while in Dachau, he was encouraged by his colleagues, by other faith leaders, to continue this celebration, even though it had to be in secret. They met and they found things in that horrible, dirty, ugly place that reminded them of their humanity and the beauty that we all bring. They were reminded that even in the most trying and horrible circumstances, we can continue to show up, to respect one another, and to celebrate the beauty that is all around us. And even though we can't be together in person, I know that we at WHUUF celebrate the beauty that is all around us. We celebrate the beauty of our community and the way that we have managed to stay connected. We celebrate the beauty of our grounds when we are able to be there together again, and celebrate in our woods and in the natural world. It will be a while before I am able to celebrate with you again. This will be my last service that I'm participating in, except I may be making sneak pre-recorded video drop-ins during worship over the summer. We'll see, as I embark on this next chapter of my life and welcome my own unique new baby sometime in the next few weeks. So please know that I will be thinking of you over the summer, and I look forward to when we can be together virtually and in person again. Thanks so much.
For our pastoral prayer, I offer this blessing by Michael de Vernon Boblet. And it seems an incredibly appropriate prayer for this day and this a moment in history. Blessed be the flower that triumphs at last over snows, over the centuries, over the heavy feet of cattle and soldiers, treading down the fragile places of the earth. Blessed be the flower that triumphs at last over the tangled branches, over the withered stem, over the tearing thorns of roses and of barbed wire. Blessed be the flower that triumphs at last, even over the hand that gathers it, cuts it off from life, from roots, from the memory and taste of iron and tears in the soil. Blessed be the flower that triumphs at last over the closed rooms that are not its home, over the efforts to domesticate its wild truth, over the vain words of priests and poets. Blessed be the flower who triumphs at last over us, over pasts and futures, over words and silences, over deaths and lives, placing them all in their proper place, restoring to all things their joyful smallness. Blessed be the flower that triumphs at last. Let us take a moment to say into the silence all those who need our blessings. And now let us take a moment in silence for reflection, meditation, or prayer, as is your tradition.
The river is flowing, flowing and growing. The river is flowing down to the sea. Mother, carry me, child, I will always be. Mother, carry me down to the sea. We are living eternal now. The past is gone, the future is tomorrow. When babies laugh, all folks slow down. Maybe the moment is talking to you now. We are hanging from a silver string, knowing each moment is a precious thing. The smell of raindrops in April coming down. Maybe the moment is talking to you now. Now is the moment here. Yeah. Now we'll never disappear. We are living the eternal now. The past is gone, the future is tomorrow. When babies laugh, all folks slow down. Maybe the moment is talking to you now. Are you alive at this moment? Are you alive? Can you feel it in your soul? Are you alive? Let your heart beat with mine. Jump into the river of time. We are living the eternal now. The past is gone, the future is tomorrow. Smell of raindrops, oh, in April, May, and June. Maybe the moment is talking to you. Maybe the moment is talking to you. Maybe now, maybe love is talking to you right now.
Flower communion has always been one of my favorite rituals in Unitarian Universalism. I love when the children come down the aisle carrying the baskets of flowers, and then the creation of magnificent, bountiful bouquets. I love how the ritual calls us to reflect on beauty, the beauty of the world, the beauty of community, and the beauty of every person. So I have moved toward this particular flower communion with some pain. I listened as my colleagues who did their ritual earlier discussed how they did it, and it just seemed depressing. Surely, I thought, during that long ago April state of denial, we'll be back together by June. Well, that is not the case. Since April, we've learned so much more about how the coronavirus infects people. For gathered community life, especially communities that sing together, the news has not been good, including a recent breakout of 236 cases in a church in Central Oregon. So here we are, in flower communion, each safely in our homes. This is not what I yearned for, and I expected sadness. Instead, I have been surprised by joy. Last Sunday, Pat, Hannah, Rick, Brad, and I set up a table of flowers. Hillary set up nearby to hand out postcards for our UU the Vote effort. And so many of you came. You offered your own flowers for the altar. You took a flower away that had been offered by someone else. We were all masked, but we could see each other's smiles in the crinkles around our eyes. We could hear each other's voices, carrying through 6 or 8 or 10 feet of air instead of through the miles of wire that make up the internet. We could feel each other's presence and know, much more clearly than we did last March, just how precious that is. It was such a joyful time. Days before that, I had gone to our first protest, where we strung out along the road, our masks on, our signs high with our conviction that Black lives matter, because no life matters until all lives matter. As the cars honked their approval, we smiled under our masks and nodded our appreciation to each other for being there. And that was a joyful time. There has been other joy too. I I experience joy when I hear from you and I learn all the ways you are staying connected to each other and looking out for each other, ways that I didn't know. We are a very caring community. I find joys in the emails and conversation where you share the work you are doing to more deeply understand racism and the, to many of us, completely foreign idea of defunding the police. We are a curious and justice-seeking community. I find joy in learning all the ways you are thoughtfully trying to live in this whirlwind moment of pandemic, economic devastation, and protests against racism. How do we function? Who are we? What do we value? How do we respond? We are a meaning-making community. We are not alone, we said at my installation just days before we closed our physical space. You are not alone. I joyfully rediscover this truth all the time. So I stand here at Flower Communion, not as sad as I expected to be, but absolutely joyful with the power and beauty of community. I just learned that community comes from the Latin word cum, which means with, and from the Latin munire, which means to fortify or strengthen. Exactly is what I thought. Exactly. Being in community means I am fortified with you. I am strengthened with you. My understanding of what community is expanding. When I first joined a congregation, community meant knowing that I belonged. I wanted the physical sense of belonging. I saw these people. These people saw me. We were together. And this has always been a very important part of ministry to me, physically gathering. And that will always be important. Of course it will. We are humans, and we are physical and social beings. We evolved in tribes, after all. For me, though, the blessing of this time is considering all the other ways that community can strengthen and fortify us without being physically present to each other in large groups. And there are so many ways to do this. The most important, I think, is small groups. I believe it is crucial for each of us to be in a small group that offers care and meaning-making. We often find chances for care and meaning-making in our gathered Sunday services and afterwards. But we need others at other intentional times that we connect with people in the same ways that we are used to doing on Sunday mornings. WHUUF already offers Chalice circles, community circles, Buddhist group, humanist group, the women's group, and many others that we can create. There is information available now in your bulletin and in the e-blast about ways to join some of these groups if you haven't already. And many of them are continuing this summer, and there'll be other opportunities in the fall. We can, as we have with Flower Communion and our Black Lives Matter protest, find some ways for some physical gathering that contains very minimal risk. Of course, these will be distant and masked, but they do remind us we belong to a community of physical beings. We can continue to distantly worship together through our virtual services, knowing we are singing the same songs and hearing the same messages. We can share and converse with each other during coffee hour or in other small groups about the feelings and thoughts that arise from those services. That is just a beginning, though. I am wondering, how do we fortify and strengthen each other so we can bring more love and compassion into the world? How do we strengthen and fortify each other together to bring more love and compassion into the world. In other words, how do we, in these very different circumstances, plant seeds of inspiration? What about growing in compassionate community? What are new ways we can show compassion for each other, especially those who can't leave their homes at all because they're such high risk? And what about those who are living alone? What about for ourselves? Or those who are marginalized or protesting in the streets? Someone in our congregation sent me a letter in the mail. It was such a compassionate connection for me, a surprise between all those bills and ads. How do we, in these circumstances, bloom in service to the wider world? And we are blooming right now, showing that through our great generosity to local farm workers, our commitment to UU the Vote, and our protests against police brutality. How can we expand and strengthen these efforts in the months that come? As many of you know, this is my last time with you for the summer. I will be taking time to rest and vacation with my family. I am truly hoping for lots of pinochle, canasta, and quirkle, and reading some fantasy and young adult fiction, which I love. I'm also taking study leave, and this is time for a minister to reflect and study and write away from the daily demands of ministry. I'm going to be exploring how WHUUF can thrive as a community in new ways in this time. I will reflect and write and research and talk with my colleagues. I'm wondering if we can understand ourselves in different ways that make us wiser and more loving this year and in all the years to come. I'm wondering if we can expand the ministry that we do. I ask you to reflect on these same questions over the summer, alone and with each other. Be curious, be creative, and talk with each other. Consider what is foundational to us as a congregation and a community. How do we fortify and strengthen ourselves to bring more love and compassion into the world? How do we strengthen and fortify ourselves to bring more love and compassion into the world? Flowers are almost ridiculous in their beauty and scent. They seem unnecessary, over the top. Whoever thinks of life as a dry, sensible effort by DNA to replicate itself has really not been paying attention. Life expresses joy at every turn, and flowers are the supreme example. We are life. We are here to witness to this universe and call out our own joy. Life is not always easy. Of course, we know that. And for most of us, these times are not easy. But life is tenacious, and we can be too, each of us, and our congregation can be tenacious. Consider flowers. How so many must open up as bulbs in the cold, dark, sometimes nearly frozen earth, tiny green, pale shoots, who seem so fragile, but somehow break through earth that I can barely chip with a shovel. And opening soon after this hard journey with vivid, colorful smiles. Consider dandelions who can find a crack in the sidewalk and push through that tiny space surrounded by unrelenting concrete and then just bloom a bright yellow. Consider the lilac or wild yellow rose that bloom on the sides of the road where I am from. Sometimes the bushes are so thick with road dirt, it is wonderful that photosynthesis can even happen. But still they bloom. The lilacs dark purple, the roses pale pastel yellow. They just affirm life. And consider the daffodils of Portland, who bloomed this year in late February, only to be capped with little snow hats soon after. But still they stretched high and proud. It is not always easy to be a flower, but it does not stop the joy they express to the world. This flower communion, I hope that even as we notice the challenges of being a religious community in these times, we can feel the joy of being a community, and that joy will overflow until even in our own homes we will experience the magnificent, bountiful bouquet WHUUF has always been and always will be. May it be so. We bless this flower communion with the words from the Reverend poet Lynn Unger. What a gathering! The purple tongues of iris licking out at spikes of lupin, the orange crepe skirts of poppies lifting over buttercup and daisy. Who can be grim in the face of such abundance? There is nothing to compare, no need for beauty to compete. The voluptuous rhododendron and the plain grass are equally filled with themselves, equally declare the miracles of color and form. This is what community looks like. This vibrant jostle stem by stem, declaring the marvelous joining. This is the face of communion, the incarnation once more gracefully resurrected from winter. Hold these things together in your sight. Purple, crimson, magenta, blue. You will be feasting on this long after the flowers are gone.
Se visten los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajaritos que vienen de afuera. De colores es el arcoíris que vemos lucir. Por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. De colores se visten los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajaritos que vienen de afuera. De colores es el arcoíris que vemos lucir. Por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling been sailing all my life now. Never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my sail and moon my rudder as I fly the starry sea. Leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep. Drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the light of the heavens in our beautiful I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on. The infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my newborn home.
As we prepare to gratefully give and receive our offering, we are reminded that love is the currency of our community. It was love that built the fires we are warmed by today, and love that planted the trees that shade us. WHUUF exists because of the dedication and commitment of those who came before, just as our future health depends on the dedication and commitment of those in the present day. We especially remember the original stewards of this land we now think of as ours, the First Nations peoples, many of whom live among us today and whom we always welcome in body or in spirit. Normally at this time, baskets would be passed from hand to hand. Now our baskets are electronic. You can make your offering by texting the number in the order of service that was emailed to you or through the link on our website. We are grateful for all your gifts, whether they fit in the basket or not. And if you're a visitor, please know that we consider your presence gift enough. Today's offering recipient is the Northwest Classical Theater Collaborative. They provide theatrical performances to those who have traditionally been deprived of cultural opportunities in prisons, homeless shelters, and schools. Last September, actor Paul Soucy and cellist Anna Fritz presented Crossing the Walls in a service at WHUUF. For a link to hear it, check the announcements that came with your email this morning. During the offering, we recite together an affirmation of gratitude and giving. These words are especially important today. Please join with me now. Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts with us, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us be grateful even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others.
Our benediction is from the Reverend Jacob Trapp. May the love that makes life beautiful, the reverence that makes life holy, and the truth that makes us free lead us onward together into a deepening and growing communion with life. I now extinguish our chalice, but not the warmth and inspiration of this community. These we will carry in our hearts until we meet again.
Carry the flame of peace and love until